I've been a long-term fan of DxO PureRAW since it first launched in 2021. Back then, PureRAW made it easy to process RAW files for editing in other tools like Lightroom in order to maximize image quality. Then, each new release has added more enhancements and options to the software. Now with the release of PureRAW 5, I'm left wondering, has DxO ruined a good thing by adding too many features? In my opinion, PureRAW succeeds because it has a great, simple workflow. Add too many features to that and you'll ruin it. So let me show you what's changed in PureRAW 5 and then I'll tell you if I think DxO has gone too far in this release. I'm using the PureRAW standalone software to compare it with the previous version. I should also make it clear that I'm using a beta version that has a few bugs and changes that DxO is still working on. At first glance, the interface looks very similar to the previous version, except that in PureRAW 5 we see a few more icons in the toolbar. Let's open a group of RAW files now to look at the features. I can do this by clicking the new Add Images button, or click the center icon in the interface, or drag and drop from my Mac Finder. We then see a preview of these files displayed as thumbnails. To work its magic, the software uses DxO lens modules that are produced in the DxO labs. You can see which modules are being used by clicking the DxO modules menu item. These are the modules for the currently loaded images and are automatically downloaded each time an image with a new lens is identified. If you don't want a particular module to be used for some reason, you can click the None option. Let's close the dialog now because I want to highlight the new Add Images button. This is such a simple change, but a very useful one. Previously, after loading a set of images, if I wanted to add more, we would need to click the File menu and select one of the options there. This wasn't immediately obvious to some users, but adding the new button to the toolbar makes the workflow easier. There are also a lot of other enhancements that have been made to the workflow that aren't immediately obvious. For example, look at how these images have been sorted by date and compare it to the layout of the previous PureRAW version. Previously, to collapse a group of thumbnails, we needed to click the small arrow icon to the left of the group. This was annoyingly small and so it was hard to click, but in PureRAW 5 the arrow has gone. Instead we just click the heading to collapse or expand it. Also notice this tick option that now replaces the arrow icon in the previous version. Clicking this toggles all the thumbnails in the group to be selected or not. Previously we needed to click the individual thumbnails to select or deselect them. And of course, we can still do that, but small improvements like the ones I'm highlighting really do make a difference when working with a lot of files. If we want to sort these images, I can still click the sort icon at the top and choose the same 3 sort options. I can also reverse the sort order by choosing the same option a second time. Now let's look at the new filter option. Previously, we would only filter the images by their processing state. Now we can filter on things like the ISO and metadata in the image files. Let's use this now to select the files in this batch that were shot at ISO 800 and above. All we do is click the option to select them and then click the Apply button. Now we only see those thumbnails that match the filter. Something else that's new in PureRAW 5 is the information icon. When I click this, we see a summary of the selected files. But watch what happens when I select just one thumbnail. Now we see more detailed information about that file. Then, if I click a different thumbnail, the information for that file is displayed instead. This continues until I close the dialog or click the icon again to toggle it off. Let's also clear the filter now using the Reset option to display all the files again because there's a lot to look at. Another new interface feature is the option to display the thumbnails either as a grid or a mosaic. Personally, I can't see the need for this at the moment, but I'm sure there's a use for it. If you prefer the mosaic view, let me know why in the video comments. When it comes to processing the images, there are changes there as well. Let's select this dark image I shot in the Vasa Museum in Stockholm. I can then click to process with preview to choose my settings. We now see the image that we're processing along with the thumbnails of the other RAW files I loaded in this batch. This allows me to select other RAW files to process without needing to return to the main lightbox. Over on the right side of the interface, we then have the processing settings, just like in the previous version. But in PureRAW 5, the layout has been simplified. First, the buttons to choose the denoising and demosaicing models have been rationalised. We now only have the choice of the excellent DPrime3, which mustn't be overlooked, and the XD2S and XD models. Unfortunately, Fuji X-Trans users still can't use the XD2S, and the software will automatically switch to XD processing. But the good news is the introduction of a new XD3 model for X-Trans users. This is still in beta development, but the results with the files I've been testing are very promising. The reason that it's disabled at the moment is that this RAW file was captured using a Panasonic G9 Micro Four Thirds camera. Looking below this section now, we see the sliders for luminance noise reduction and force detail. Most of the time you don't need to change these, and in the previous version of the software they were hidden in the advanced section. The default setting here is 40 and 0, which are the defaults used in the DxO Photolab software, and they will produce good results with most RAW files. It's only if you think there's a particular problem that you might really want to try changing these to other settings. We then have the optical correction section, which I like to leave turned on. You can see the correction being applied if I move the split screen slider left and right. And this brings up a few interface changes that I'm pleased to see DxO has made in PureRAW 5. The icons to control the preview in the previous version were, in my opinion, not very intuitive. These have now been improved and moved to the top of the interface. We can now hide the film strip and the control sidebar. Easily switch between full screen and split screen previews, and change our zoom settings, as well as quickly switch between full screen and 100% magnification. There's also an icon to display the information panel that we saw earlier. Let's now magnify this image to 100% to check the processing settings. As you can see, the preview looks excellent for this RAW file, with low noise and plenty of detail being recovered from the shadows. Notice also how fine the sharp details in the image are. The demosaicing is partly responsible for this, but the lens sharpness optimization is doing most of the work. If I turn this off and then on, you can see the results. Now, most of the time this looks great, but with some of my Micro Four Thirds camera RAW files, I find that applying the standard sharpening is too strong. If you have a similar problem with any of your RAW files, you can reduce the sharpening by changing to the soft option in the drop-down. But if you still think that this is over-sharpened, then you can now use the new intensity slider to reduce the sharpening effect even further. Something that took a lot of time in the previous version of PureRAW was changing the different settings to suit different RAW files. Now, when we have these settings as we want them, we can click the Save option in the drop-down to save them as a preset. We can then quickly apply the same settings to other RAW files using the preset. Looking next at the film strip, we see a new icon which we can use to paste the current processing settings to other images. Then, on the right side, we see the icon to switch between the grid and mosaic views again. Here though, the mosaic view does make more sense as it produces a larger thumbnail view in the same space. At this point, I would normally click the Process Now or Add to Queue buttons, but there's something missing. In the previous version of PureRAW, there were options to control the output format and image renaming to name just two. In PureRAW 5, These have been moved to a new screen which we can access using this icon in the side panel. This is useful because we don't change these settings often. Moving them to a separate page makes sense. Let's add this image to the processing queue now. We then return to the lightbox view where we can see a small icon indicating that this is pending processing. We also see the status of the processing queue at the bottom of the screen. This time, let's select one of the Fuji images to work with. As before, I'll click the Process with Preview button. Let's apply the same G9 preset to this, even though it's a Fuji RAW file. We can then switch to using the new XD3 method because this is an XTrans file. Next, I want to show you another new feature, which is the support for layers and local adjustments. I also want to make a disclaimer here. I'm still hazy about how this works, so I may need to do a future video when I learn more. My assumption is that the global settings I applied before affect the entire image. Then, by switching to the local adjustments page, I can select areas of the image and apply additional adjustments. Let's look at an example by selecting the foreground in this image. First, I'll rename the layer to foreground so I know what it's targeting. Then, I'll use the brush tool to select the area I want to adjust. After selecting the foreground, I can magnify the image to 100% and turn off the mask view. My adjustment settings then appear below, allowing me to apply additional processing to the selection. Let's reduce the luminance to 0 because I'm assuming that it's being handled well enough by the global settings. I'll then increase the force detail slider to extract more detail in this area. And I'll increase the lens sharpness intensity to add more sharpening to the foreground. If I click the icon to the left of the layer, you can see the effect that this adjustment is adding to the global settings. Then if I click the preview icon at the top of the screen, we can see the original RAW file. That looks good, so let's add it to the processing queue and return to the lightbox. Now, if we open the processing queue, we can see 2 batches and it's possible to view the settings for each. Let's click the button to start the processing. Then, when the processing is complete, we can view the processed images. And as you would expect, the results from this are excellent. So, let's go back to the question though that I raised at the start of the video. Has DxO gone too far with these changes in PureRAW 5? After all, these add a lot of new features and options to complicate the workflow. Interestingly though, most of the features that I've looked at seem to make working with the software easier than before. The only bit that I don't find as useful is the local adjustments features. I don't want to spend more time using brushes on individual images to make local adjustments. I just want to be able to process my images quickly as possible and with minimal thought, but achieve maximum quality. And of course, I can still do this in PureRAW 5 without using the local adjustments. So, has DxO gone too far with these changes? Well, no, I don't think they have. I don't need to change my existing workflow if I don't want to, and I'm finding the new features in PureRAW 5 do make life easier. Of course, if you already have PhotoLab, you may want to integrate that with Lightroom instead rather than using PureRAW. To see how, watch this video next. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed the review. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for another video.